Elvis was in the middle of "Can't Help Falling in Love" when someone in the audience shouted something that made him stop the entire show. What happened next left 18,000 people in tears. September 15, 1975. The Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis roared with the sound of nearly 18,000 voices as Elvis Presley's band swelled into the opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Lights spun across the vast bowl, catching sequins and tears alike. In that instant, the King's voice seemed to rise above everything, until it didn't. The music, so steady and sure, faltered. The band's hands froze on their instruments. The sound cut, sharp and sudden. For a breathless moment, all that remained was the echo of a single, desperate voice. From somewhere near the front, a mother's cry tore through the charged air. "Please, Mr. Presley, my boy is dying. Please let him hear you." Margaret Sullivan, clutching her 7-year-old son Danny, stood trembling as every eye in the Coliseum turned. The crowd, thousands strong, fell utterly silent. The stage lights, once blinding, seemed to shrink to a pinprick around Elvis's stunned face. Time stretched. The hush was so deep, even the hum of the amplifiers faded beneath the weight of a mother's plea. The spectacle of a rock and roll idol vanished, replaced by something raw and human, a moment when the boundary between star and stranger disappeared. Elvis stood motionless, microphone in hand, searching the darkness for the voice that had shattered his song. In that suspended heartbeat, the entire arena waited, breath held, for what would come next. This story is entirely fictional and intended for entertainment and educational storytelling purposes. Danny Sullivan's world had shrunk to hospital walls and the quiet hum of machines. Leukemia, relentless and swift, had left him with less than 48 hours, according to the doctors at St. Jude. His mother, Margaret, refused to surrender to the ticking clock. She clung to her son's last wish, to hear Elvis Presley sing, not through a radio, but in the living, breathing heart of Memphis. The Sullivan family's savings had vanished into medical bills, but Margaret scraped together enough for 2 $9 press-on tickets, reserved seats, precious as gold. She spent hours on the phone, pleading with the Coliseum's box office, begging for a spot close enough that Danny could see the stage without straining his frail neck. The tickets arrived, cardboard stiff and stamped with the date. Margaret pressed them into Danny's palm, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. On the day of the concert, Danny wore a homemade Elvis t-shirt, his name painted in glitter across the front. The trip from the hospital was a gamble, every bump in the road a risk, every breath a prayer. Margaret carried a letter from the oncologist, clearing Danny for the outing but warning that any excitement could be too much. Still, she wrapped her arms around her son and whispered, "We're going to see the King tonight." Inside the Coliseum, the lights and noise threatened to overwhelm him. But when the band launched into Burning Love, Danny's face lit up. He mouthed the words to Hound Dog, clutching his mother's hand. Each song was a lifeline. For one night, the world outside, eye drips, whispered diagnoses, the ache of knowing time was running out, fell away. Only music and hope and a mother's determination remained. This story is entirely fictional and intended for entertainment and educational storytelling purposes. Behind the curtain's hush, the roar of the arena faded to a distant memory. Elvis knelt beside Danny, whose small hands trembled in his lap, clutching a white baseball cap already too big for his head. The boy's breath was shallow, eyes wide, searching the face he'd only seen in record sleeves and dreams. Elvis's voice, so mighty on stage, softened to a lullaby's hush. He sang "Love Me Tender" just for Danny. No spotlight, no band, only the gentle timbre of a legend soothing a frightened child. Each word landed with the weight of a promise. You are seen. You are loved. In that quiet, Dr. Maya Chen, her white cap tucked under her arm, watched from the edge of the room. Years later, she would recall moments like these in her research, noting how familiar melodies could lower a child's stress hormones by as much as 62%. For Danny, the effect was immediate. His shoulders eased. His mother's hand grew steady in his. When the last note faded, Elvis pressed the cap into Danny's palm. "You keep this for me," he whispered, "and I'll keep singing for you." That cap, never far from Elvis's dressing room after that night, became a quiet artifact of comfort, a reminder that music can cradle a heart on the edge. The world outside waited, but here, for a moment, time itself was tender. Elvis stepped from the hush of backstage into a tidal wave of expectation. The band stood ready, but all eyes locked on the king and the frail boy in his arms. Danny's white baseball cap sat askew, his small hand curled around Elvis's thumb. The Coliseum, packed wall to wall, held its breath. For a heartbeat, the crowd was no longer an audience, but a single, trembling soul. Elvis set Danny gently at center stage and knelt beside him. Then, with a voice that trembled but did not break, he sang the first line of "Love Me Tender." Tears streamed down faces in every row. Grown men, teenagers, grandparents, strangers holding hands. The words, simple and soft, rippled through the silence. Danny's lips moved, barely above a whisper, and Elvis leaned in, letting the boy's voice mingle with his own. The sound of weeping rose and fell like surf, unashamed and unstoppable. A critic later wrote that the arena became a cathedral of compassion, the music dissolving every barrier between stage and seat. When the final note faded, Elvis pressed his forehead to Danny's and whispered, "You made us all believe again." In that moment, the applause was not for a star, but for a child's courage and a singer's kindness, a duet that left 18,000 hearts changed forever. This story is entirely fictional and intended for entertainment and educational storytelling purposes. Even in fiction, a single act of kindness can echo for generations. Compassion outlives applause. Today, we still crave that glimpse of shared humanity, on stage and in each other. Thanks for watching.